Before I got so into movies about 30 years ago, I was a big sports guy, playing baseball, basketball, volleyball, tennis, badminton, touch football, and street hockey. Yeah, I'm Canadian, but I never could skate, so I settled for sneakers and one of those orange hockey balls when hockey was in play. In fact, you name it, I probably played it at one time or another, even if not always very well. I'm not a good dribbler in basketball or a good deker in hockey, but I've also never been a horse guy, and I've most definitely never raced one. Now, I think I've been on a horse, but if so, I was very young. I can't even be sure. Now, what does my history with members of the equine species have to do with our sponsor, Sparkplug Coffee? Well, nothing. Although I suppose if you're an expert rider, maybe you can hold a cup of joe in one hand and hold the reins with the other, but you gotta be an expert. Just like they always shoot guns with one mitt while holding onto the reins with the other in those classic westerns. And if you're gonna go and do something as show-offy as holding reins while also holding a gun or holding a coffee, you just gotta get Sparkplug's beans to put in your cup. They are premium quality little brown guys, which will allow you to brew the best coffee you've ever made. And not only is it a treat for your tongue, it's so much cheaper and just plain better than takeout. It's convenient too because they'll ship it right to your door if you make your home in Canada or the United States. And they don't even charge Canadians for delivering it to their porch. And hey, join the Autopilot Coffee Club. You can cancel anytime you might need to, but you can also just put a pause in your membership in case you're going to the big city for a while and trying to win a contest. Their website is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Using our HYES promo code will win you a one-time 20% discount. Find your new favorite, you young riders. Well, I'm a few seconds away from starting the talkie talk about the ins and outs of this movie. Open the gate, 'cause I'm off. And action! Have you ever seen National Velvet? Hello, movie chums, and thanks a pile for downloading or streaming episode number 662 of Have You Ever Seen? This podcast looks back at films from a long time ago and spoils those classic extravaganzas. We post shows every Monday, but also every other Friday. Case in point, right now. And when I, Ryan Ellis, aka Mr. Brown, put a show online on a Friday morning, it's always just me talking to myself. My wife Bev, aka Mrs. Brown, will be back on Monday though, when we'll be talking about Barry Lyndon. Okay, let's set up some details about National Velvet. It had its premiere in New York in mid-December 1944, but MGM released it in January 1945, making it an 80-year-old motion picture. Or I guess you could arguably say 81. It's funny too because that premiere in 44 should mean it was eligible for the 1944 Oscars, the Going My Way year. But its wins and nominations were with the 1945 group, the Lost Weekend year. And that's why I'm covering it this year, not in 2024. Not that I have to be a slave to anniversary years, I just like 5s and 10s, and if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you probably know that. As for financial success, this was one. I couldn't confirm the totals, but it looks like this did very well at the box office. Wiki has it more than doubling its budget. Let's do a skinny on the story before I go any further, though. So Clarence Brown directs a Helen Deutsch, Theodore Reeves screenplay based on a book by Enid, is it Bagnold or Bagnold? Maybe the G is silent. Bagnold. Elizabeth Taylor, young Elizabeth, so young, is Velvet Brown, one of 4 children in Herbert and Araminti's family, 3 daughters, and their very irritating young brother. Donald Crisp plays Dad Herbert Brown, and Anne Revere plays Mama Araminti Brown. Araminti, what a name. And Velvet, for that matter. What is that, Velvet? That's beautiful. Mickey Rooney plays My Taylor, the son of Herb's old friend who finds the fam at their English farm. Fam at the farm. He and Velvet make the introduction first, then they spot a champion caliber horse, and she gets inspired to ride the Pie, short for the pirate, right? I know it's piebald in the book, so Piebald. But I was reading something about pirate in the movie, so anyway. Oh, and My, by the way, is short for Michael. In the book it is, at least. Maybe they made that clear in the movie too, but I don't remember. Oh, and speaking of how people are addressed, the parents are always calling each other Mr. and Mrs. So formal. So it takes a while for him to admit to Velvet, but we eventually learn that Mai was once a talented jockey who was traumatized after an accident during a race. But he can't deny he's drawn to horses, so he agrees to help young Velvet train Pie so they can enter the horse in England's Grand National Race. So in other words, with a steeplechase over there, that'd be like the Kentucky Derby over here. And after some tomfoolery with their jockey leaves them riderless, Miss Brown ends up being the one in the saddle. Can she and the Pie take it home and win the biggin? Yes, in a way. It's actually got a Kingpin ending, if you think about it. Just a little less sponsorship by a condom manufacturer. and she doesn't get to kiss Vanessa Angel, which is her loss. Or, in a nutshell, and this is mostly because I just love quoting Brad Pitt in that crazy scene at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it does apply to this movie anyway, but she was on a horsey. But yeah, Velvet Brown does love her horsey, almost irrationally. I think even Bev would have said, calm down a little about your pet, if she'd watched this with me. Okay, maybe she wouldn't say that because she's animal obsessed too. Maybe my wife would have enjoyed seeing this for the four-legged friend alone, but she didn't watch it with me. Another nutshell could have been stealing from Groundhog Day, so I got two nutshells in this one. Gosh, you're an upbeat lady. Because Velvet has some sad moments in this film and tears are shed, but Taylor gets to play an almost eternal optimist. You can't say nothing gets her down, but she always seems to find a way to charm people into helping her and the horse. And I just realized that it's my Taylor, the character Mickey Rooney plays, but then she's Elizabeth Taylor in real life. Okay, it's time to look at some numbers. This old film looks great on Rotten Tomatoes. 98% of the critics on there point their thumb up. So of the 61 reviews on there, 60 of them are fresh, and their average is 8 out of 10. The audiences don't like the flick nearly as much, though, because it's only at 78% on the popcorn meter. Those are not the best reviews of director Clarence Brown's career. He has 4 movies, in fact, with perfect 100% ratings. But it's right up there. It's close. 9,800, yeah, they're pretty close numbers. I can do math. Elizabeth Taylor has a couple of perfect 100% ratings of her own, so this is third best for her on that site. Cat in a Hot Tin Roof and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf are right behind with 97 and 96% fresh reviews of their own. I should acknowledge, by the way, that I think our neighbor is doing something banging, so if you hear that, that's what that is. I got curious about how other horse movies have been reviewed over the years. Many movies have horses in them, sure, probably thousands, but my research focused on films where the ponies are the point, not some Western that has men shooting at each other while riding around on noble steeds. So of the 5 I looked up, The Velves was actually number 1 on the Tomatoes, and by a lot. Then it goes The Black Stallion at 91%, another Mickey Rooney film, by the way. The other 4 famous horse flicks I'll highlight don't do nearly as well as the 2 that Rooney was in. Gary Ross's Seabiscuit in 2003 is at 78%. Spielberg's Warhorse is at 74%. Redford's The Horse Whisperer is at 73%. And Secretariat from 2010 doesn't get a fresh tomato by very much. It's at 64%. Chris and I reviewed Seabiscuit and Secretariat several years ago on Scoring at the Movies, by the way, our old sports movie podcast. I like both of those a lot more than I did Warhorse, and I have no real opinion about Horse Whisperer. I saw it probably 26 or 27 years ago. Black Stallion, too, I saw that a long time ago. And okay, here's some things about Black Stallion, though, I thought were pretty interesting. Roger Ebert had it number 1 on his 1980 top 10 list, even over Raging Bull, which he had second. And ranking it in 1980 is odd because it came out in 1979. Its Oscar nominations were with the 1979 flicks like Kramer vs. Kramer and Apocalypse Now. But then Ebert didn't even put it on his best of the 80s top 10 list that he and Siskel did at the end of the decade. But he had Raging Bull number 1 for all the 80s, which I'm not disputing, but it's interesting. Number 2 one time and then number 1 in the other movie that he had that same year. Nope, didn't even rank. Siskel liked Black Stallion too, incidentally, and made it number 7 on his 1980 list, although he had Raging Bull number 1 that year. Then he went and agreed with Roger that the bull was number 1 for the whole decade. And the other bit of trivia about the stallion is that Rooney tells a story in one scene in National Velvet about a shipwrecked horse. Then 35 years later, he was in a movie about a shipwrecked horse. Or 34 years, whatever. And that was the Black Stallion. Okay, but this is the National Velvet podcast, so back to that. Which was inducted into the National Film Registry in 2003, along with 4 motion pictures that have previously been talked about on this channel. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which has some horses in it too, plus Patton, White Heat, and Young Frankenstein, which had horse whinnies whenever Frau Blucher was said. I cannot do a horse whinny, so I'll just say horse whinny. Clarence Brown's steeplechase flick won a couple of Oscars and was nominated for 3 others. The 2 wins were for Anne Revere as Best Supporting Actress and for Robert Kearns' editing. The nominations were for Clarence Brown as Best Director, Leonard Smith's color cinematography, and the Gibbons, McCleary, Willis, and Griffith sets. The Gibbons in question there is Cedric Gibbons, who won 11 Oscars and was nominated for, 6,000 more, including this one. That's a lot of cachet, but the film was not up for Best Picture. Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend won Best Picture that year, and we covered that a long time ago. And it's at least a good movie, if not one of Billy's best. Anchors Away, The Bells of St. Mary's, the sequel to Going My Way, Mildred Pierce, and Spellbound were the other candidates. This is better than at least Anchors and Bells, National Velvet is. And I'm surprised to say in this review that I thought it was worthy of a nod for the big trophy, but especially since Brown was nominated for directing it. And compared to those movies, Anchors Away and Bells of St. Mary's, yeah, it was worthy. 2 years earlier, when they still had 10 flicks in the Best Picture race, which they had been doing for 12 years, I bet this would have scored a nomination. National Velvet was 9th in the sports category of the American Film Institute's Top 100 Genres. And with this, all 10 of those top tenors have been covered by yours truly, either on this channel or on Scoring at the Movies. Bev and I discussed Raging Bull, Rocky, and The Pride of the Yankees, which were numbers 1, 2, and 3, plus Bull Durham and The Hustler, which were 5 and 6. Chris and I yapped about Hoosiers, Caddyshack, Breaking Away, and Jerry Maguire on Scoring at the Movies, that old sports movie podcast. You can still download episodes if you want to. They were number 4, number 7, number 8, and number 10. So as it turns out, Bev and I reviewed more sports flicks than Chris and I did on our specific sports movie podcast, but he and I didn't start podcasting together until 5 years after the wife and I did. And Raging Bull and Rocky were on the AFI's list, and we did Pride of the Yankees early on in the days after we did those AFI movies. And I think Bull Durham was early on in those days too, 2016 probably. Anyway, the Velvet, sits in 24th place on the AFI's compilation of Top 100 Cheers. Several of the sports films I just mentioned, including Rocky, Breaking Away, and Hoosiers, rank even higher on the most inspiring list. You make a good sports movie and the chances were good that the AFI would call it inspiring and place it high on their Cheers list. National Velvet had the verve to be nominated for the Top 100 Thrills, but it wasn't exciting enough to get the votes to finish in that Top 100. And I wouldn't put it on there either. I don't think I'd even nominate it for the Thrills list, really, to be honest with you. 5 minutes of relative excitement at the end of the film isn't enough to include it with the thrillingest flicks in American history. So those credentials are pretty impressive. Critics, awards bodies, many people speak well of the Velve. How about me? All right, let's get going. It's an MGM film, so we begin with the great big musical fanfare. I guess every studio did that really, but especially MGM did. And we're informed that this is a Clarence Brown production. And the person best remembered from it is billed third. And that's Elizabeth Taylor, who was still a kid. Mickey Rooney is our number one huckleberry in the billing, and he's walking down a country road as the opening titles play out. It's the 1920s, and this very American young man is trudging his way to Sewells, a small town in Sussex, England, and takes a rest by sitting down by the side of the English Channel, I think is where they are. It's a good shot, actually. Really nice shot. Although while this entire story is in fact set in England, they shot all of it in California, so it was probably the Pacific Ocean, not the English Channel. Obviously, they did a lot of it in the controlled environment of a studio as often as possible. And they did plenty of it on racetracks, of course. They even shot on a golf course. But what's that line in Austin Powers? What's remarkable is how much England in no way looks like Southern California. And hey, here's little young Velvet in class, singing with her fellow schoolgirls. One of them is Angela Lansbury, who is nearly 20 years old in reality, and just towers over Taylor and the other girls. I guess it's possible, or even likely, that kids of all ages would share the same classroom in a small town about 100 years ago. Lansbury is Velvet's big sister, Edwina, and Juanita Quigley is their younger sister, Malvolia. The three, but especially Edwina and Velvet, leave school arm in arm, and we hear our girl, Velvet, talk about how she just loves horses. And after this, the class stuff, we don't really see very much of that, but she's always on horses. We'll get to that point, though. Velvet happens by Mai, who's still taking a rest there by the water. They made the introduction, and there's a bit of friction, because Mai's a young world traveler and seems to be a little snippy with people he's just met. They both know something about members of the equine species, though, and Mai talks about hands and horse measurements. Hands, of course, is the height of the horse, I believe it's what it is. If it's, 5 hands high, is that tall? I don't recall. And that proves he knows far more than I do. I just proved it again. The real hero of this movie, the horse Velvet names the Pie the second she meets him, is just like Seabiscuit in the movie that bears his name. He's ornery, and his owner seems like he wouldn't mind if someone would take this big old runner off his hands. Velvet takes Mai home for dinner, where he and Wee meet the parents. They're a fertile couple because not only do they have those 3 girls, but they have a freckle-faced young boy named Donald, too. Donald. And, of course, Donald Crisp plays his dad. Jackie Butch Jenkins gets to spend plenty of the next 2 hours annoying me. Revere's quite freckly herself, though, so you can see where Downy Boy got those freckles. The Browns also have a dog, Jacob, who Mai, Malvolia, and then Edwina feed from the table, even though that's verboten with the parents. At least Father has a heart, and before the scene ends, he's letting the pooch have some nibbles himself. Oh, Father. The dog's real name was Daisy, by the way. Daisy was an experienced performer and had been with Columbia Pictures before this, I believe making those Blondie movies. Were they movies or just short subject type things? Anyway, you know the comic Blondie. If you don't, then never mind. So the dog had more experience being on set than many of the humans in the film did. Elizabeth Taylor was only making her something like 5th movie here, and Angela Lansbury was just in her 2nd. So the dog really could have pulled rank on them and said, I've got seniority. Of course, dogs rarely do things like that. Not never, just rarely. So Velvet volunteers Mai to work for her dad in his butcher shop, which he doesn't take her up on just yet, although meat delivery is going to be calling young Taylor's name before too long, never fear. and Mom Brown is cool with the fellow racking out in their spare room. I like how in these early scenes, Revere subtly manipulates Crisp without him picking up on it. I bet the wife often gets her way in this house, even though men are supposedly always the unquestioned boss of the household back in these days, or even many decades later they still were, supposedly. And they would probably say they are now too, but I don't know about that. Meanwhile, Edwina is enjoying a goodnight kiss on the cheek from her beau, Ted, which the parents don't get too worked up about because, well, it's just a simple kiss on the simple cheek. Now, it's not like Lansbury disappears from the story after this because she has a few more emotional moments, but she does become sidelined, only getting to play this I'm gaga for Ted storyline from this point on. The Browns seem to be a content family, but their house isn't busting with space. Bursting? Maybe bursting I should have wrote there. Because the three girls have to share a bedroom, with 3 single beds lined up maybe a foot away from each other. Pop says his goodnights to his daughters, being reminded by Velvet how much she loves horses. I just love horses. And knowing that Edwina is planning to sneak out and see the Tedder. He's pretty aware of what his daughters are into and what they are going to do. But Velvet is too worked up about both Mai and Pi to sleep, so she goes to hang with Mom in her bedroom as she braids her hair, meaning Mom braids Velvet's hair. We find out that the Mrs. was a great swimmer in her day. Did she have to give up those wet dreams just so she could be a house mom to 4 kids? I reckon so. Even though Velvet assures Mai that he can stay with them and work for Dad, Mother will see to it, in fact, the young Taylor's only considering it. He isn't quite sure what he wants to do. Playing hard to get Mick. But maybe he isn't, because even though Mai seems to be a horse savant, he tells Velvet he hates them. He's sick of the whole scene. Velvet might talk all the time about Pi ever since she met him, but she does already have a horse at home, Miss Ada, who's out in the stable with Mai, and she says he'll have to get over his hatred of the 4-legged fellas because she loves them so, and she plans to be a champion rider. Of course, he doesn't have to do anything he just wants to. She's so bossy, but in a cute way. Lucky that Liz is so likable in this movie because this is psycho behavior here otherwise. Do what I say, boy I just met, even though you just said you don't want any part of it. It's ironic for a movie that's all about the love of animals that the Browns own a butcher shop. We'll dote on one and love one type of creature, but we'll slaughter and eat the others. They can be bred and slaughtered. Bev and I love dogs, and yet we eat meat every day, so I do see the hypocrisy of making this point right now. Velvet and Jacob join Mai on the meat run. I think the dog's really in charge of that wagon, the carriage with the horses, because Velvet knows, where to find a customer's house, and he doesn't. And Mai reveals here that he fell off a horse once. He was scarred by the experience enough to blame all of them. Leave it to the dog to help put the plot in motion, but here we go as Jacob burns rubber off the cart and chases down the Pi, who's just minding his business in a field. Then the horse bolts and steeplechases over a brick wall, I think it was a brick wall, high enough to impress even Mai. He figures the height to be equal to jumps horses do at the Grand National, but he pushes down his initial enthusiasm for the horse's talents because, well, it's too early in the movie for him to be all in. Pine, meanwhile, kept running and tore through town and started breaking stuff. We saw it the day Mai came to town that Farmer Ede is Pi's owner, and he's obligated to pay for the damage, making him even more set on getting rid of this reckless high jumper. When Velvet and Mai and Jacob get back from delivering that meat, they in fact find a sign in the Brown shop advertising that Ede is going to auction off the gelding, which Velvet is calling the Pi, but no one else is yet. Mai buys raffle tickets for all the kids, so they can get in on the auction themselves, even though their dad isn't too thrilled about that at dinner that night. But he's overruled by everybody else. It's just that kind of family. A guy named Hallam gets dragged into the butcher shop, literally, and he's forced to pick the winning number, which is 113. Was that forcible number draw just for comedy? I guess so. They dragged him into the butcher shop. Well, anyway, 113 is not Velvet's number, and she's heartbroken. Although Mrs. Brown comforts her daughter, as she does more than once in this film, Revere's so stalwart. It's nice to see an actor win an Oscar by underplaying. But then fortunes swing her way when they redraw the number because no one had 113. And Hallam pulls 62 this time, which is what Velvet had. So she passes out and cracks her head on the floor after finding out that the Pi is hers after all. Mr. Brown is happy for her for about 3 seconds, until he remembers that they're responsible for another horse now. While Mai trains Pi, Velvet recovers from her fall and obsesses over riding the horse even while in bed, pantomiming the motions. I could make a crass joke about how her motions are similar to something else this very actress must have done a lot with gentlemen over the years, but I won't. Let's keep this episode acceptable for all ages. So Velvet starts to practically live in the saddle as she and Pi race all over the place and jump over every brick wall in sight. Horses are to Velvet what movies are to me, a part of life every day and for huge chunks of the day. I even half-watched a couple of old 40s flicks on YouTube while I was preparing these very notes. Pi is temperamental and he freaks out in front of Mr. Brown, which makes the old man give Mai grief for ever doling out the raffle ticket to Velvet in the first place. Velvet. Am I saying Velvet right? I don't think I am. Maya was starting to feel good about being with the Browns, I think, until he got bawled out by the big guy. But Velvet doesn't let him dwell on that because she's eternally upbeat about the pie and the Mai. She gets on him about entering the horse in the Grand National, which Mai tries to quash. He tells her she would have to train the horse and herself way too hard to make it feasible, but she of course can never be deterred when it comes to her jumpy horse buddy. Maya's just worried that he'll get fired if he crosses the Brown boss again, so why rock the boat with all this racing stuff? But Mrs. Brown pulls her lady wise thing yet again in response to Maya when he keeps on saying that doing all this would be folly. What's wrong with folly, is her response. I guess she thinks Yoda was wrong. It's not just do or do not. There is a try. And she was a competitive swimmer, so she knows about putting in the time and effort to be great at sports. And we find out here that Mother's swim trainer was Dan Taylor, Mai's father, which becomes a huge plot point in the very last scene for some reason. I didn't get why that was such a big deal. But anyway, Araminti was told when she was 20 that a woman can't swim the channel, so now that her daughter has the chance to be great at something, she will do all she can to help make that happen. It's a touching moment that choked me up a bit, actually, when Mom dumps a whole pile of coins she won in her swimming days right in Velvet's lap, which they'll use to pay for all the expenses to train the pie for the National and also to enter him in the race. Revere gets to give a nice little speech about all this, which has Taylor in tears. I recovered quickly, though. No tears from me. It was only 10:30 in the morning, for one thing. It was too early in the day to cry. I'm a late-night crier. So Maya's off to London with 100 gold sovereigns in his pocket so he can register the horse. While Mrs. Brown wishes him good luck, Mr. Brown wishes him a good time, obviously having zero faith that Pie can win the race, but thinking that Maya's going to spend that money on stuff in town, in the big town, big city, big city, big city. And he also has no faith, really, I think, that Maya's going to come back and they'll see that money again. Velvet doesn't get to go along, but she does ride Pie alongside the train to see him off. Mai smiles a lot more now than he did when the movie started. They're healing each other, although she didn't need to be healed. He hits a bar before he can spend the money on what he went there to spend it on, and gets drunk on beer, helped in the drinky venture by two guys who know a few things about betting on the ponies. And I guess what they're really trying to do is hustle him out of his money, which the doofus puts on the table for all to see. Maybe this guy was off on his own when the movie started and has been so unhappy because he's a nincompoop. He gets misty that Mrs. Brown trusts him with her money, and I was amazed he got it back from these guys. I figured the whole story was going to go that he would be broke when the scene ended because they robbed him or conned him out of it. I have seen this movie before, by the way, but repeat after me, something I've said a lot the last few years in this podcast. I saw it so long ago that it might as well have been mostly new to me. To Mr. Brown's surprise, Mai comes back with a receipt and some change. Is the old man starting to be a bit of a believer in Tobey Maguire and Seabiscuit? I mean Mickey Rooney and the pie? They still need to find a jockey, though, but Velvet's constant enthusiasm finally wins Mai over, with the thought that if they do win the National somehow, he'll get enough of a payoff to buy himself a place of his own. A country of our own. So our two main characters start to train the pie hard, day and night, which goes well, even though Mr. Fourlegs occasionally dumps her off his back when jumps go a little rough. Every sports movie needs a montage, and here's this one. Velvet rides the horse everywhere, even in the water. But just to give Lansbury something to do and to give the film some drama, she cries about how Ted is being sent away to another school by his parents, while Pie is really sick out in the stable. It is winter and there's snow on the ground. Maybe he's just like most of us and can't wait for spring, and he's on strike until it gets here. Maya isn't sure if he can heal what ails the horse, but the parents and good old Jacob stay up all night worrying. Jacob was so worried, as Maya and Velvet nurse Pie out in the stable. And then he just stands up. Pie magically recovers, and Velvet, who's been up all night and hasn't eaten, is so excited that she might as well be on speed and cocaine. Goes to school and she's fine. Although, one of the parents predicts, that she's going to crash in a couple of hours. That's probably true. Time passes and Pie fully recovers, and Maya's back to talking about all the jump training they'll do. And the Pie starts learning not only how to do the jumps as efficiently as possible, but how to take good turns. You can't go wasting motion and therefore time when you're chasing steeples. The night before Velvet, Maya, and of course the Pie head out for the National, Donald freaks out and I almost had to mute the TV because Jackie Jenkins was whining so shrilly. Ugh. A tiny bit of this kid goes a very long way. I think one thing that's indisputably better the last 30 or 40 years in movies are child actors. They're not as awful as they were back in these days. I'm talking about the really young ones. I don't mean Elizabeth Taylor. Okay, Jackie Coogan and Jackie Cooper were good, but maybe this is just how they were directed. Still, kids in the 40s and certainly in the 30s were usually unbearable to listen to. If they weren't talking like 4-foot gangsters and thinking they're 5-foot Jimmy Cagney, see? Then they were whining and shrieking like this kid. Ugh. Anyway, everybody sees them off the next morning, with Father giving Mai some money to bet on the Pie. Just don't tell Mrs. Brown about it. Then he saw his face, Now he's a believer. Edwina even apologizes for not caring about the pie when he was sick, because she was busy being upset about her boyfriend having to leave. But of course, the most chipper character I've seen in a long time is going to forgive her sister. I wonder if Elizabeth Taylor looked back fondly at playing Velvet. She does a really good job in this movie, but it can't be easy to always have to play a smiley Pollyanna who never gives up on family or animals. Just over 20 years later, look how she played the polar opposite character in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Range. So we're off to the big city with Vel and Mai having to ride in a boxcar with Pi, which means they're sitting in hay no different than the horses. Although maybe this is Velvet's choice. I can't ride up in a comfy train car while Pi sleeps out there by himself. She didn't say that, I'm just saying that maybe she thought that. They need to find a jockey when they get there, though, and the guy they intended to use doesn't think their horse has what it takes. He's like Jack's dad, Christian, on Lost. You don't have what it takes, Jack. Thanks, Dad. I'm going to carry that with me for the rest of my life, and then I'll go die in a mysterious island. I'll show you. Well, since they can't find anybody else to do the riding, Maya will have to do it, although he finally confesses what we knew without even being told, that he was a jockey, and he was in a brutal wipeout, and a fellow jockey died. He cries about it, and so does she. Hey, she isn't ebullient. Ebullient? I love that word. How do you say it? Ebullient? So she isn't that for once, and he's just too shell-shocked to commit to doing this. He has horse PTSD. Until he takes the Pie out alone late that night and mounts up. He knows the horse doesn't know what it's like to have him on its back and maybe won't like it, but they get used to each other pretty quickly. And he's back, baby! The young Taylor's going to ride that horse in the big race after all, dagnabbit. Fear of riding over. Only he comes back to the stable to find Velvet fully dressed in the jockey outfit. She's going to ride. She needs a haircut so she can look like a boy, but Mai doesn't think this is very smart anyway. She might break her neck, only she insists the Pie will take care of her. Mai's disappointed too because he obviously wants to ride the race now, but he knows she does know the horse better than he does, and she is the owner after all, not him. He just works here. So, right on camera here, Rooney snips off the young Liz's actual brown locks, or makeup devised a pretty convincing wig for him to cut. It looks like he's cutting her actual hair. I didn't read if he actually did that or not, if it was real hair. He claims while he's doing this, she'll be disqualified if she does win, once they find out, that woman is a woman. But she doesn't, that's not what it is it? Shakespeare in Love quote, I love that quote. Just like, well, there's this does. But she doesn't care. She thinks he's wrong that they'll go all sexist after the fact. Plus she just wants to ride her race. Sometimes it's just the doing of the thing, not so much the winning. Although she definitely wants to win the race too, and thinks she will. Somehow, no one realizes that someone with this facial bone structure is a little girl, and a pretty little girl at that. But she passes muster during the weigh-in, with Mai telling everyone that she's Latvian and doesn't speak English. Your move, Estonia. I guess when you're this young, it's not totally ridiculous to believe people would think this is a boy. For one thing, they're taking that for granted. Why would it be a girl? Still, it's funny to think that the actress many consider the most beautiful in Hollywood history was in a movie where she's mistaken for a young dude. The dude. Taking her easy for all us Taylors. Pie is entered as simply the Pie, which seems so short for a horse. No pie, fi diddle die, or pie in the sky, or pie is the worst dessert and Ryan refuses to eat it. There are 32 horses entered in the Grand National, and the place seems packed with spectators. I never understood horse racing. Maybe I would if I was a gambler. It's just weird, and I'm not even the 101st person to say this probably today, let alone ever, that we root for a horse who doesn't really understand what any of this is for, and a jockey who's barely doing any of the work. But he gets the credit. Same with car racing. I should root for the automobile, not the driver. I know riding and driving are more complicated than just that, but in a nuts and bolts sense, jockeys and drivers aren't the same as boxers or basketballers, or even curlers, because they're doing the work. Anyway, they're off. Apparently it's a 5-mile race. I always think of these things as being over in about a minute, or even seconds, but this is the steeplechase, not a flat-out race just down a track. There's a lot of jumping to do, and I guess endurance is a big part of this too. Being fast out of the gate is great and all, but can the horse keep this up and not crash out of exhaustion? Maya's elbowed out by taller men while trying to watch. Some of the horses can't keep up with all the jumps and they fall, although Velvet and the Pie are still in it. I gotta say that even though I just said I'm not a horse race guy, this was pretty exciting. I don't care if the horse wins really that much, except they do, so I'm in. Rooney certainly sells how excited he is. He even has fun playing off a posh fellow who has his own investment in the race. His horse is even in the lead for a good chunk of time. Towards the end of the race, there's a nasty fall when a horse barely clears a hurdle and lands hard on the other side, nearly folding itself in half. I don't know if some of the accidents were planned, including this one, and the horse does seem to walk away from this spill and other spills with other horses, but there are some ugly wipeouts in this movie. So either really great stunts were done, or they got lucky and the horses didn't die, or maybe they did, and they just cut that part out of the final cut. The pie surprises everyone by gaining enough to be in 5th place, then 4th, then 3rd. Here comes 2. As they come up on the 30th and last jump, Velvet gets Pie to pull out in front, and they win by a length. But the girl is still just a kid, and she's too tired to hold on once they pass the finish line. The Pie is a champ of the Grand National, but Velvet passes out and falls off. And unfortunately, the rules are that the rider dismounting before he, or she in this case, reaches the enclosure does not count as finishing the race, so she DNFs. Oh man, that's a tough rule. It's curious that the story has Velvet falling off the horse when the race is over because, while I have no doubt Taylor did a lot of the riding, they obviously use stunt riders quite often. And you can tell in close-ups when Taylor is on a mechanical horse, not the real thing. These fake horses actually became more convincing in movies by the time they made Seabiscuit nearly 60 years later. But I think it's pretty clear when she's just acting like she's even on a horse at all. Although most of the sports action in this movie, as little as there is, works pretty well. They might have found out Pie's rider was a girl anyway, but because she has to be treated by a doctor, the jig is up. Girls can't do boy things, even when they do them better than the boys. Robble, robble, robble. Everyone's shocked to no end that a girl won the Grand National, but the objection that she didn't actually completely finish the race holds up, and the Pie is disqualified. But no matter, Velvet and the Pie are stars now, and the newspapers are filled with stories about how a 12-year-old non-boy could possibly be good at riding a horse. I was really touched again by the Revere-Taylor relationship, when after Velvet gets home, Mom confirms they are the best in the world, no matter who gets credit for winning the National. These scenes are not maudlin on Revere's end especially, and I think that's why I like them so much and why they were very touching to me. She's just very matter-of-fact, but also emotional in being matter-of-fact. The media storm the Brown farm, and even young Donald gets interviewed by reporters, dishing out some I knew her when type stories. The comic relief here is just not very comic. I could have done with a lot less of Donald in this film. Mr. Brown is deluged with letters asking for Velvet to do promotional things with Pie, including going to Hollywood to make movies. And I guess this is getting meta now, since Taylor herself had just recently gone to Hollywood, and I'm sure her parents were getting letters about, hey, we got to get her in this thing and that thing, and let's sign her to a contract with a studio. But she doesn't want Pie to go through all this hoopla. That's not his thing. Of course, Hollywood might want Velvet, but they definitely want the horse too, and she can't do that to him. She'd just rather he be a horse and be happy, and she wants them both to live a quiet life now that they've achieved the impossible. And she has the tears to prove how much she cares about her four-legged best buddy. She might always be happy in this movie, like I said before, but she does cry a lot too. Clarence Brown asks a lot of a young actress, but you can't deny that she carries this movie. The main character is the best thing in it, and that's not always true about movies. Okay, maybe Anne Revere is the best thing in this, but Elizabeth Taylor's right there with her. Anyway, her dad is annoyed, but as always, wise mama says all the right things and supports her daughter's decision not to become a movie star. Crisp gets to play a nice scene with Rooney out in the stable where he calls him Mai for the first time, showing respect for the boy who brought so much to his family. He admits that he thought Mai would run off and take the 100 sovereigns with him when he went to London, which he admits he nearly did. He doesn't know why he didn't do it, but clearly Velvet and the family are the reason why, and the Pie. The cynic has been healed by this experience of being with the Browns. Mai can't bring himself to say goodbye to everybody, so he asks the old man to do it for him. He's done his best with the horse, so he's off to make his own way in the world now. Even though without saying it, you know Mr. Brown would be more than fine if the young man stayed there with them after all. I'm guessing Mai will go off and try to be a jockey again. Velvet's sad that Mai just up and left without saying goodbye to her, although Mother says she needs to let him do his own thing. But the folks are cool with her running off to track him down. Mrs. Brown even gives Velvet permission to tell Mai that his father is the one who coached her to swim the English Channel, which is a nice connection, but I don't know if that's something the pint-sized horse trainer has to know. I think I said this already, but I don't really get this ending. Anyway, after she leaves to do just that, for the first time in a movie where the parents always called each other Mr. and Mrs., they call each other by their first names and get a little lovey-dovey. Velvet mounts Pie and finds Mai leaving on the same road where we first met him coming in. She catches up and presumably tells him that his pop knew something about the breaststroke and taught it to her mom. We can't hear what they're saying, though, because the shot stays long. But triumphant music plays, and that's it. We're out. Now, this ending, is it suggesting that he'll come back now and stay with them? Maybe even marry Velvet when she gets a few years older? The movie never at all implies that he's sweet on her, thankfully, because she's 12 years old and he's supposed to be around 20, maybe. I just don't get why they left things this way. I guess it's in the book. And it's a shame that they end on this, I found, very odd note, because I like the movie for the most part, just not the last 15 or 20 seconds. So, the cast. Elizabeth Taylor's climbing the ranks as far as actresses we've covered the most often. Her number 6 now. We reviewed Father of the Bride just a few months ago, plus there's A Place in the Sun, Giant, Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. It's nice in this case that they cast someone who was the right age because she was only 12 when they started shooting, and her character actually is 12. She's certainly of the age to need braces or a retainer too, and she has one of those. It's often that she's battling, I don't want to wear this thing, Mom. Maybe the actress herself needed it and they just wove it into the character. Taylor has an English accent in this, which Lansbury does too. Almost no one else sounds like they're from around there, though. Rooney sure doesn't. Neither does the kid. Neither does Anne Revere. Crisp was born in England, but wasn't he actually Irish? Now, Taylor and Lansbury were both born in London themselves, but I don't think they were raised there, so I think we think of them as American actresses. Elizabeth had a distinctive voice, but I don't think you'd say her default was to sound like she's from the UK. I know she had accents in other movies, but it wasn't what she naturally sounded like, I don't think. Well, at least the two actresses are trying to sound like Englanders, unlike their co-stars. Taylor, of course, grew up to be a giant star, but she got really sick in the early 60s, and many people think she won that Oscar, the first one, for Butterfield 8, because word was that she was going to die. We better give her some gold while we still have the chance. But she recovered from that and lived another 50 years, and even won a Gold Naked Guy 6 years after Butterfield 8. The second Oscar was very deserved because it was for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. They also gave her the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award in 1993, which was for her work during the AIDS crisis, or pandemic as she called it. And I guess it was a pandemic. A lot of people died of the disease, and it was global. She gave a nice speech at those Oscars, too. And guess who presented Taylor with that Hersholt Humanitarian Award nearly 50 years after they made this movie? Her co-star in National Velvet, Angela Lansbury. The girl with the violet eyes also won the AFI Life Achievement Award that same year in 1993, and was only the fourth woman to be honored by the AFI at that point. 17 men had been, but on the lady side it was just her, Bette Davis, Lillian Gish, and Barbara Stanwyck. At least they've done a little making up for that in the years since, with 7 women being honored in the past 25 years alone. That's still not parity, of course, but it's a lot closer than what it was when the AFI started all that back in the 70s. The young lady who went on to play Wilma's mother in The Flintstones, which was her last film role, by the way, almost didn't get to play Velvet Brown. Clarence Brown thought she wasn't girly enough. Plus, maybe it wasn't him, but MGM wanted Shirley Temple. Now, Velvet was intended to be an older girl than either Temple or Taylor were at that time. Temple was about 4 years older than Taylor, by the way. But let's face it, if you can cast Shirley Temple in her heyday, and I think the 40s still was her heyday, you cast her. But that didn't happen, and Brown didn't keep pushing back once time had passed, because Elizabeth got a little older and started to look less boyish, but also became a good horse rider and just looked stronger than she had when he first said, not her. But even with all that training and experience, she broke her back falling off the horse during the production, an injury that gave her a lot of grief when she got older. Even though he was an obstinate prick with almost everybody, although I guess not really with her so much, and riding him did hurt her, she loved the horse anyway and kept him even when the shoot was over. And curiously, she had that real-life riding accident while making this film, and then the character gets dumped off the horse a few times. And there's a plot point of a kid falling off a horse in Barry Lyndon, a movie Bev and I will be reviewing on Monday. The only time we've talked about Mickey Rooney before this episode was when he played that racist Japanese character in Breakfast at Tiffany's. I guess they thought that was hilarious 60-plus years ago. They obviously did. He was in his 40s when he did that, and it wasn't good, but I find him to be absolutely insufferable in the films he made in his youth. But who cares what I think now, because those Let's Put on a Show musicals he did with Judy Garland and his Andy Hardy movies helped make him a huge box office draw. Just ask Dana Carvey, who worked with Mickey once, and apparently the guy never stopped bragging about how he was king of the box office back in his younger days. And he was the man for years on end. Hey, you don't have to like the guy to admit, he was huge. My problem with him was when he was a teenager is that he was always so mannered and big. He was phony. He certainly has his moments yelling and mugging in this, too, although it's nothing like I remember him doing in so many of those 30s era films. Joseph Ewell Jr., his real name, was 93 when he died, but was still acting right up until the end, getting to play scenes with Dick Van Dyke in a couple of those Night at the Museum movies. But as much as I just said I don't like his early films, he actually became a pretty good actor in his middle age and older years. He's great in Requiem for a Heavyweight, which came out in '62, and of course he was up for the Best Supporting Actor Oscar in The Black Stallion in 1979. And while the Micker never won a competitive Oscar, he was given a Juvenile Award back in 1938. Then the Academy gave him an honorary award in 1983. So he and Taylor had, 5 Oscars between them? Speaking of acting awards, Anne Revere was up for 3 Supporting Actress Oscars in the 40s, including Gentleman's Agreement, and of course she won for this movie. And she beat out her co-star in this film, Angela Lansbury, who was up for The Picture of Dorian Gray. The other 2 times we've reviewed Revere before today were in Body and Soul and A Place in the Sun, where she played John Garfield's mama in the first one, and the mamere of Monty Clift in the second. Donald Crisp won an Oscar the only time he was ever nominated, which was for Best Supporting Actor for John Ford's How Green Was My Valley. He also played Ulysses S. Grant in Griffith's Birth of a Nation, and then had a small role in D.W.'s follow-up, Intolerance. which were the first two movies we ever reviewed back when we were calling ourselves the Top 100 Project. He was in Mutiny on the Bounty as well and Wuthering Heights. We've covered all those. He also directed a lot of movies back in the silent era, including working with Buster Keaton on The Navigator. Angela Lansbury was, of course, in The Picture of Dorian Gray and was phenomenal as the villainous Mrs. Iselin in The Manchurian Candidate nearly 20 years after this came out. So she was still really young, playing Lawrence Harvey's mom. She was the voice of Mrs. Potts in the 1991 animated version of Beauty and the Beast, and she was the one who sang that immortal song during the movie. Celine Dion sang it in the end credits. Anyway, those three films have been reviewed by us. It's funny to think this lovable lady who was best known for Murder, She Wrote on TV would have got her start in thrillers like Gaslight and then Dorian Gray. This was her second feature film, sandwiched between those two. We got the thrillers, Gaslight and Dorian Gray, and nominations, I think, in those two, I believe. And then for Manchurian Candidate. She played a great villain for somebody who was a lovable actress, although she wrote about murders in that TV show. There are plenty of other actors I could talk about right now, but I'll just discuss one more, and that's the horse, whose actual name was King Charles, and he was related to two of the greatest horses in the history of competitive racing, Seabiscuit and Man o' War. It's curious that the novelist Bagnold would call the horse Pie and one of the two lead characters Mai, which is short for Michael, but it might have been wise to differentiate between the two names a little more than they did. If you saw a muddy print of this, maybe the audio's not great, on DVD or TV, you might have had a hard time figuring out if they were talking about Mickey Rooney or the horse. Their director and uncredited producer was Clarence Brown, although the title card did say a Clarence Brown production off the top, so we knew he was a producer by that. His direction in this is very solid. Other than the kid, the actors are all convincing, and what he needed to do is to get good stuff out of Rooney and Taylor, and he clearly did. Plus, the film is 2 hours long, and I wish it had been a little shorter, but it was pretty well paced. I wasn't bored, but I'm sure making a flick with kids and horses and a dog was not easy, and he made a very easygoing motion picture that worked very well. Brownie was nominated for the Best Director Oscar 6 times and never won it. Wikipedia lists it as 5 nominations, but I see in other places that it was in fact 6. He was up for 2 in 1 year, which makes him the most nominated director who never won. People like Altman, Hitchcock, and King Vidor are right there with him. Well, 5 nominations for those guys, not 6 that he actually had. But at least all 3 of them were given special Oscars before they died. Altman and Vidor got honorary Oscars, and Hitch was given the Thalberg. Old Clarence was never honored at all on Oscar night. He was streaky with those nominations too, getting 3 in the span of 2 years, in 1929 and 1930, because he had 2 in 1 year. Then he was in the running 3 times between 1943 and 1946. Clara Bear's only movie that I've ever reviewed before this was a fantasy flick, Angels in the Outfield, another sports movie though too, which Chris and I talked about a few years ago on Scoring at the Movies. The writers were Helen Deutsch and Theodore Reeves. Deutsch worked a lot on Broadway, but had credits on both King Solomon's Mines and Kim in 1950. She also had a credit on The Unsinkable Molly Brown in 1964. Reeves, meanwhile, only had about 15 other credits, and I didn't recognize any of them. They based their script on Enid Bagnold's 1935 novel, and Hollywood adapted that book yet again in the early 60s, making a National Velvet TV series that ran for a couple of years. The producer was Pandro Berman. He was an assistant director and editor in his early days, then got into producing pretty big titles and did that for a very long time. His works have dotted the Have You Ever Seen landscape for a long time now. We have a landscape now? We talked about Swing Time, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Father of the Bride, and Blackboard Jungle, and he produced them all. He never won an Oscar for Best Picture, but they gave him the Thalberg in 1977, which was about a decade after the one I just mentioned Hitchcock got. The cameraman was Leonard Smith, who won an Oscar for shooting Brown's The Yearling in 1946. He died of a heart attack just a few months after winning that trophy, so National Velvet and The Yearling were among the last couple of films he made. It's not a bad way to go out. This, I believe, is the first time a flick of his has been looked at on this channel. The Oscar-winning editing was by Robert Kern. He also cut The Thin Man, which I monologued about last year. I think he cut all the Thin Man sequels, too. He also did the editing for the original 1951 Angels in the Outfield for his director here, Clarence Brown. Herbert Stothert composed the music. He had won an Oscar for the Wizard of Oz score. He also worked on the tunes for Mutiny on the Bounty, A Night at the Opera, and here it is yet again, The Picture of Dorian Gray. All right, so some parting thoughts. I got a lot out of this movie. I liked it more than I thought I would. Taylor's charming and, of course, cute as hell. Rooney's not bad at all, plus I did like Crisp and Revere as the parents, her especially. The horse racing's good, considering this was made 80 years ago. Seabiscuit especially, and Secretariat for that matter too, are way better, more vivid horse racing films. Although they're not about jumping over things like this movie is. They're just run until we stop type races, but they're better made. They're also a lot newer. As for whether or not this is a feminist film, well, it's clearly at least trying to be go-get-'em girl type of stuff. She's third bill, but this is Taylor's movie. I look at the way Araminti has her way with her husband. She might not be the actual head of that household, but she's the head of the household. And her character had supreme talent, just as Velvet does. No one else in that family seems as special as the mother and second oldest daughter do. The males certainly aren't special. And this podcast is coming off another feminist movie just 4 days ago when Bev and I reviewed 9 to 5. Those 3 ladies took control of their lives and their jobs and made something better for not only themselves, but their fellow employees. So unless you can't stand films where girls or women are rewarded for their skill, tenacity, and dedication, you ought to like both 9 to 5 and National Velvet for at least those elements. But yeah, this is sweet, it's inspirational. Horse racing movies usually remember to have the owners and more importantly their riders truly love the animal. It certainly applies here. It goes beyond, ride my 4-legged employee and make me some money. Look at how Velvet just wants the Pie to have a normal life after they won the Grand National that one time. You know people would want Pie to race again the next year to defend that title, but I don't think he will. She doesn't want to exploit him just to rake in some bucks. So I'm not raving up and down about National Velvet, but just about everything this production wanted to achieve, I think it does. It draws you in and makes you care about the characters. As a non-fan of Rooney, I thought he was at least fine. The pre-teen Taylor showed the magnetism she'd so often show us as an adult. Revere might not be the Streep or the Winslet of her day, but she's quietly quite fantastic as Mama Brown. And she gets some good zingers in this too, including the one about how while Mr. Brown is regaining faith in humanity, she's putting her faith in the horse. So yeah, if you like classics and you can deal with that shrill Jackie Jenkins stuff, which I barely could, then you'll probably agree that this motion picture is not bad at all. So that was how I saw National Velvet. I'll give you the lowdown on how to contact us and also promote our next few episodes, but first, trivia. I've got my standard 3 questions. There's no theme to these, though, as there often is. So question number 1. John Lithgow was the Reverend in the 1984 Footloose, but who played the pious Reverend in the 2011 remake? Question number 2. Ghostbusters was not Dan Aykroyd's original title when he started writing that screenplay. Was it Ghost Smashers, Ghost Breakers, Ghost Hunters, or Ghost Crushers? And question number 3. The Story of Fire Saga is the subtitle of the Will Ferrell, Rachel McAdams Netflix movie, which was based on an actual music competition. Called what? All right, then, we'll find out about those elusive answers in a few minutes. First, I need to tell you that the next time you hear a podcast on this channel, Bev will be with me again, and we'll be analyzing Redmond Barry's fraudulent jerkery in Barry Lyndon. Yet another Kubrick flick. We've covered almost all of them. As for the next time I do this thing on my own, that'll be in 2 weeks, of course. The topic will be our first Ida Lupino movie, The Hitchhiker. Not a lot of women were directing Hollywood features back then, but Lupino was, and I figured we were overdue to feature something from her filmography. Plus, it's a pretty good little thriller. If you want to see it before we get to that point, it's on Tubi, it's on Canopy, and it's on YouTube as of April the 15th or 16th, but today's 16th. So you got a lot of options to watch it before I do review it. I ask that you pay back this free content by rating and reviewing our podcast on your app. Dole out 5 of those stars. Subscribe to us too, and do the same subscribing thing on YouTube. You can find that channel by searching for @HYES Ellis in YouTube's search bar. Comment and like those episodes as well, if you would. You can also write a nice long message via email. Our address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. Social media is always an option too. On Twix, I'm @MovieFiend51, and Bev is @BevEllisEllis. I'm trying to make Twix happen. It's never going to happen. It's like fetch. On Blue Sky, I'm Ryan-Ellis. And drop the @ you used on Twitter for Bev. She's just Bev Ellis Ellis. And hit the keys that'll take you to Sparkplug Coffee. You can nab a one-time 20% savings by using our HYES promo code. The website is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, let's get to the answers to those trivia questions. Number 1. John Lithgow was the Reverend in the 1984 Footloose. Who played the Reverend in the 2011 remake? It was Dennis Quaid who had that gig. Dennis Quaid took the Lithgow role. Question number 2. Ghostbusters was not Dan Aykroyd's original title. Was it Ghost Smashers, Ghost Breakers, Ghost Hunters, or Ghost Crushers? It was Ghost Smashers. They made the right move in calling it Ghostbusters. And question number 3. The Story of Fire Saga is the subtitle of the Will Ferrell, Rachel McAdams Netflix movie, which was based on an actual music competition called Eurovision Song Contest. So the title is Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. And that is that. Thanks a lot for listening to me go on and on about National Velvet. Join us on Monday when Bev and I talk about Barry Lyndon. Meanwhile, I'm going to go outside and tell my horse I won't be exploiting him for profit. He'll just get to live his life without the pressure of competitive racing. Maybe he'll even get to do some breeding with some lady horses. If only I had a horse to make any of this true. And cut.